Hey guys, Michael Mansell here, and in today's video, we're gonna be building not one, but two GSG audio DIY BTS. Is that enough acronyms? I don't know. BTS stands for behind the screen subwoofer enclosures, and then we're gonna be throwing in these massive Eminence 21-inch drivers, and they are going to potentially destroy my brand new Epic home theater. So stay tuned, we're gonna go from A to Z building both of these subs together, but first, coffee.
Got work to do, and this car ain't gonna build itself.
All right, now that we got our coffee in us, let's get started. That is my nephew Mark, who is helping me with the theater build and also building these subwoofers. Read through the first starting guides on those first sheets in the PDF, but then it's very important to dry fit everything. And when doing so, you'll find maybe a little rough edges like this that you can simply file down. You don't want to find that out when you're actually have glue, wet glue down, and you're ready to assemble the pieces together. The instructions were pretty straightforward, and we just followed them step by step. There were a couple places where we had to go back and look at them and really kind of understand the visuals of how we were needing to put these together, but they're numbered and they do have arrows pointing which way certain pieces need to be fit. Clamps, let's talk about clamps, because buy as many clamps as you need and then times that by 2 if you don't want to have to wait for small areas to dry before you move on to bigger areas. You're gonna want to get varying sizes of them too. Get long ones, get short ones. Pipe clamps work as well. Then these little dowels, these are a little hard for me to find, but I did find them at Ace Hardware. The dowels go right in there, and just make sure everything is aligned when you're putting that section together. These pieces went in fairly easily. It was nice to have an extra hand for holding some of these in place while we got the clamps in, and just, you know, fit them together as they're designed to fit together and make sure all the other slots line up. If some of the slots don't line up, chances are you've got them in backwards. So just, again, dry fitting, dry fitting, dry fitting. Make sure you dry fit these pieces before you apply that glue. And don't be shy with the glue. I'll have links down in the description of all the glue and the brushes and any other tools that I purchased that are readily available online. I'll have those links in the description below, because the right tools, the right glue definitely made a big difference. It's amazing how accurately these pieces are cut. They are cut on CNC cutting machines at the factory at GSG Audio, so they fit in very smoothly. So if you're finding yourself having to really force something in, then chances are it might not be fit right, or you might not have some other pieces aligned properly. There were a couple of pieces where I did have to use a rubber mallet to set them in properly, but that's just because it is a really nice tight fit. But if you're finding yourself having to put excessive force on it, check your fitting before moving on. And then while we went along here, we did make sure we kept the glue cleaned up as we went. Here's an instance where I did use a piece of spare wood to rubber mallet that piece down in, because it had multiple connections and it just was easier to do that. Cleaning up glue is a key while you go around. The less glue you have dried on the outside that's bleeded out, the less sanding you're gonna have to do, because when it's all said and done, you're gonna wanna have a nice, clean, smooth finish, especially on the outside. And then it was time to put these little support inserts in there. These were pretty simple and straightforward. We did apply glue to both the grooves and the pieces of wood themselves, so that we got plenty of glue in there. The last thing you want is one of these pieces rattling or loose on the inside once it's all put together, because at that point it's gonna be too late for you to remedy it. Here's an example of using multiple clamps. The more clamps, the better. It's just going to ensure that there's no pieces that are bowing out or separating while you're trying to hold down the main piece that you're putting in. This section was a little tricky, and make sure you follow the directions very carefully because the way the arrows are going on the pieces of wood was a little confusing. Maybe it's not going to be for you, but there was a step where we applied some glue and then had to wipe it off and clean it and put it back on. So just make sure you double check the guide because these pieces here on the ends can go in two different ways. And if you do that, you're going to end up with the notch or the opening on the wrong side. It's kind of hard to explain, but when you're doing it, it'll make sense. So just make sure you're double checking that, dry fitting again before you apply that glue. And then with these clamps, don't over tighten some of these end pieces where the opening is because you don't want these end pieces of wood to bow. So watch your other connections while you're clamping down and kind of go from right to left equally with clamping down so that you're not popping out other pieces of wood, especially if you're not waiting for the entire thing to dry from your last step before moving on. We did do this over several days and that helped. And I would certainly recommend that as well. There's no need to be in a hurry or rush. Now, when it was all said and done, we did have to file down some areas before applying the top piece, which was not a lot. It was very, very minimal. But do go around and just make sure the top is really, really flush. All the connections are nice and flush so that that top piece can sit on there very easily and flat all the way around. So here we're setting it down. The fit was amazing. We just went around and made sure all the corners were nice and flush. Again, the more flush it can be, the more square your box is, and the less sanding you're gonna have to do on the finishing step. Here you can definitely see all the clamps we use. We just did not shy about using clamps. We also weren't very shy about using glue on this top front piece. It's actually, I say top, but it's the front face of it. So the front face has 2 sheets of wood here, and we applied the glue. Maybe there's a more efficient way of doing this. We actually, for the second one, we just used one of the rags to just wipe it all around instead of using the little brush. It's a little efficient, but we did apply the glue to both sides very liberally. Maybe a little bit too much glue, but they say there's no such thing as too much glue. So when we started clamping it down, it was dripping all over the place. And in some respects, I kind of found it a little beautiful how the glue just dripped down the sides, but we did wipe all that up and we had to keep clamping and wiping and clamping and wiping and clamping and wiping, which wasn't horrible, but it was a lot of cleanup on this one because we went a little heavy on that glue. Now on to sanding. Make sure you do wear a mask for this portion of it. You do not want to be breathing in all that dust. Hey, it's 2021. I'm sure a mask is readily available. Obviously, KN95 is going to be the preferred ventilation system. But yeah, just start to sanding. We did use a power sander here. We used some hand sanding in a couple of places, but it was obviously much faster with the power sander. But do be careful because this wood is fairly soft, and if you push too hard, you're going to cut too far. Here's a step that I did. I did sand off the corners, and this was just to alleviate the sharp edges. Even though I was going to paint this, I wanted to make sure those corners were not sharp, so when I'm lifting it, moving it at all, just going to be much more comfortable. And actually it turned out, in my opinion, a lot better. It had a much better look when finished. Here I'm just spray painting flat black inside this opening because I'm not going to be able to brush or roller on any of the black texture that I'm going to apply here inside of there. So it was just easier to spray paint this before I applied the exterior texture. After I cleaned the entire sub down of all the dust, I then started to apply the texture coat. I researched a few different coating options and I came down to Duratex and Exo Hide. And while both are great options, I did think that the Exo Hide was going to be the easiest and fastest to apply. And I was really pleased at how it turned out. I followed the instructions. I used the roller brushes that they recommended and it went on very smooth. I did 2 coats of this Exo Hide, which I got from Parts Express, and it simply just rolls on. I mean, you could use a hopper and spray on Duratex, but that is a little bit more of a lengthy process overall in terms of getting the hopper set up. Unless you're used to doing spray painting, then not a big deal. But at the end of the day, these were going to be behind the screen. They were going to be behind the acoustic material, so they weren't even going to be seen. It was really just for me to know that they were finished, they look good, they were protected behind the screen. And so I did just roll it on like this with the exo hide. And it is important that once you get it all covered, that you go over it one more time with your roller with even strokes going across the entire face of it. For the most part, that'll just give you that finished non-streaked, non-lined finish. I'd set them in there temporarily so I get my hole marks. I marked all of the holes for where I was going to pre-drill the screw locations, and I just used some string in there to set the subwoofer in there initially and make it easy to pull back out. You'll see that a little bit later where I show that in the video. And then I applied the foam that I found. This is just a weather stripping that I found. I'll link it down below. It was really nice material to easily apply around the inside area. And this is just gonna prevent any vibration between the subwoofer and the cabinet. At this stage, I decided to put the wire inside. This is 14 gauge, and I did choose to go with the 4-pole Speakon connector because I was going to use a Speakon adapter for my subwoofer cables. So that you can see there, right there, that's the 4-pole Speakon connector that GSG Audio was nice enough to actually give you. They include an adapter for this that you can glue right onto the port of the sub where you're going to plug the wires in. So what I did is I just connected to the back of the Speakon connector first, and then fed that speaker wire through the hole inside of the subwoofer so that it was ready there for me to connect the subwoofer driver to once I was ready to install that. And here you can see how it fits right in. The outline there is the little wood adapter piece that you glue in, which perfectly fits this Speakon connector, which I will also link in the description below. I just got it on Amazon, super cheap, and just holds in there with the 4 screws. Nice, clean, finished look, and super secured so that I can plug and unplug these very easily without having to mess with any other wires. Then this step is really optional, and there's a lot of debate in the community of whether or not this helps the sound, the frequencies at all with the subwoofers, but I chose to go with it because I did get a lot of insight from Stephen Smith on my home theater build, and so I did go ahead. I had this denim insulation still left over from my theater build, so I decided to go ahead and just put them in each one of the subs. So I just used this spray adhesive and put it in there fairly liberally. GSG Audio does have some cool documentation showing that that isn't necessary, but I went ahead and did it. This here is me putting the string through. There's a variety of methods. You can use zip ties. I just had the string lying around. So this is something you definitely want to do when fitting your subwoofer in there, to get the screw holes, to put it in, in the final steps, just to make sure. Because once you get that subwoofer in, it's extremely heavy, and you would have to really go through a lot of hassle to try to get that thing out if you didn't use the string to give yourself an easy way to pull it out. Here I'm showing the washers and the screws that I use because the Eminence drivers don't come with screws, the subwoofers don't come with screws, so you're gonna have to source those on your own. I will link these in the description below because I don't know why, but I struggled trying to find the right screws, the right washers to make sure that this thing was fully anchored in there. But enough talking, let's fire these things up. Highly recommend GSG Audio's Flatpacks. These sounded amazing when turned on for the first time.